But now we need to take the crankshaft pulley off, which is this big pulley here. That looks to be a 27mm socket, and that's a pretty high torque joint. Now you can spend hours and hours trying to mess around with joints like this, but this is what I have. It's just a Harbor Freight corded impact. It goes up to 250 foot-pounds of torque, and it was a 27mm socket, and I was able to break that bolt free in about 7 seconds. Now that that bolt is loose, I'm going to have to try and figure out how to get this pulley off. It's usually pressed onto that crankshaft pretty tight, and so I might have to go to AutoZone and rent like a 3-jaw puller type of thing. So I'm working on this crank pulley right now. You can see I got a 3-jaw puller I rented from AutoZone. I'm able to get the hooks on that first ridge, and it takes a little bit of difficulty, a little bit of finesse to be able to get these locked onto the ridge without them falling off. I do recommend it is adjustable, so I use the shorter reach, so I put it in the front hole on the hooks right there. And I also put the bolt in, the crankshaft bolt, loosely into the threaded hole so that the threaded rod here on the puller doesn't actually press up against the threads. I didn't want to damage the thread, so I just engaged the first couple threads with the bolt, and now I'm pressing against the bolt head. It takes a little bit of finesse, like I said, to get it to all line up. I do recommend tightening some of the hardware here so that it's not so loosey-goosey and the joints will stay put. Alright guys, real quick note on installing the Harmonic dampener back onto the crankshaft. You saw when I took it off I had to use a 3-jaw puller, and there's a couple other different types of Harmonic balancer removal tools that just act as a threaded press. Problem is it's a really tight press fit to get it back on, so you need to basically line up that Harmonic balancer or crankshaft pulley onto the crankshaft so that the keyway is aligned, and then you need to use a similar tool to do the reverse operation of pressing it on. Now there's 2 different tools that I rented from AutoZone. One is just called the Harmonic Balancer Installer Kit. The other one is the Long Reach Harmonic Balancer Puller and Installer. So the regular balancer and installer kit looks just like this. It's a bit of a long bolt, and it's just a threaded sleeve, and it has a bunch of different adapters in here. So the logic between this is you got this long bolt, you got this long threaded rod. The logic is that you put the bolt through here, and depending on what type of crankshaft you have, whatever the thread is, you just put on the special adapter so it can adapt to any type of crankshaft. Now they actually have an adapter fitting that fits the VG33 crank bolt. It's M14 by 1.5 thread pitch. The problem that you run into is at the end of the crankshaft, the threads are actually recessed into the crankshaft a good way. So you can see this is the part that actually fits in the crankshaft, but this bottoms out on the outside of the pulley before you engage any threads. So the regular Harmonic Balancer Installer Kit does not work from AutoZone. That's just kind of a byproduct of trying to have a one-size-fits-all type of tool. Now the Long Reach Harmonic Balancer Pulley operates on the same principles, but you can see instead of having a big threaded rod and then like different adapters on the end, it just has multiple bolts that are all threaded in here. And so instead of having a bunch of little adapters, you just have the actual bolt that you need. So there is the M14 by 1.5, and it has this giant flange nut, and it's actually attached to a bearing surface. This allows you to tighten it down. And so all you do is you got to slide this all the way up the threaded rod. Yeah, so once you back the nut far enough out, you just need to make sure that you have enough room to slide it over the pulley. And you line up your pulley, you get it started on the crankshaft, and then you thread the end of the rod several threads deep into the crankshaft. Then you just take a wrench and you tighten this nut down, which will act as a press that will push that harmonic balancer back onto the crankshaft. Now it's also important to note that some people might just take a 2x4 or a block of wood and hammer away at it. And sure, that might work in some cases, but it's not a very precise or controlled method for reinstalling it. In some applications, you might just take the crankshaft bolt and take an impact wrench and just drive it home. The problem with that, though, is that you're actually still twisting the bolt in as you're pressing on the actual harmonic balancer. And so what that does is it actually stresses the threads that are internal to the crankshaft. So by having it this way, the crankshaft threads are just holding the bolt, and all of the actual moving threads are going to be on this rodded end right here. So that just helps protect from accidentally stripping out or messing up the threads and not being able to reassemble the bolt. And on a side note on using an impact wrench on the bolt to drive the harmonic balancer home, is the bolt head is actually not large enough to actually catch the pulley, and you don't want the bolt head spinning and grinding away at the pulley anyway. So that's why there is this large washer. But the problem is you put that large washer on, and now the bolt's not actually long enough to catch the threads and drive the pulley home. So that's why you really need to use this tool to install it. I'll go ahead and get started on that process, and I'll show you how it looks when it's set up. Alright, so you can see I've got the harmonic balancer already lined up with the keyway. It's slid on. I've got this threaded rod threaded into the crankshaft a decent way. And this nut is actually a pretty large size. My crescent wrench that's adjustable didn't actually go large enough, so I'm going to have to use some channel locks. But I'm just going to make sure that the bolt itself doesn't spin. And I'm just going to keep spinning the nut to press the harmonic balancer on. This is going to be a little bit tedious with the channel locks here, but it's a lot easier than trying to mess around with hammering or trying to get it to go on with an impact wrench and bolts that don't fit. So anyway, I'm not going to show you the entire process here. It's pretty similar and straightforward to what I'm doing, but I just wanted to share that if you need to remove and reinstall the harmonic balancer on the VG33 engine on a Nissan Xterra in the first gen, that's 2000 to 2004, you can get the jaw puller from AutoZone, and you can also get the harmonic balancer reinstaller from AutoZone, but you need the long reach kit so you can get into the recessed threads on the crankshaft.